He sat down in the ashes outside the town and took a piece of broken pottery to scrape the sores that ran from his head to his feet. A week before, he had been the richest man in the East, 10 children at his table. Now the children were buried, the wealth was gone. His own wife had told him to curse God and die, and his 3 best friends were coming to make it worse. If you have ever sat in the wreckage of a life you used to recognize, stay with me here. The one thing this man never lost is the only thing that ever held him. The book tells it without softening any of it. So went Satan forth from the presence of the Lord, and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his foot unto his crown. And then this line, the one I want you to see with your own eyes. And he took him a potsherd to scrape himself withal, and he sat down among the ashes. Picture the old man on the dung heap at the edge of the village, the place where the town threw what it was done with. Boils head to foot, a shard of broken pot in his hand, because that was all the medicine left to him. The greatest man of all the people of the East, sitting where the garbage was burned. I am not going to rush you past that picture, because most of us did not get here gently either. Job lost it all in about a day and a half. The raiders took the oxen and the donkeys and killed the servants. Fire fell and burned up the sheep. The Chaldeans carried off the camels. And then a great wind came across the wilderness and struck the house where his 7 sons and 3 daughters were eating, and it fell on them, and they all died at once. His body broke out in sores after that. His wife looked at the ruin of him and said, "Curse God and die." And do you know what he answered her? "Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil?" He did not flinch, and he did not pretend. He just refused to let go. So here is the question the whole movie hangs on, and I want you to carry it the whole way through. When a man has buried his own children, when he has outlived his own life, and somehow keeps breathing, is there anything left in the world that cannot be taken from him? Job is about to find out, and the answer is not a refund. God does not hand the dead children back before the end of the story. What Job finds in the ashes is not his old life returned to him. It is a presence that never once left the heap. They told him nobody was coming. They told him wrong. To feel what fell, you have to first see what stood. Before the ashes, before the broken pot, there was a man the book introduces with a care it gives to almost nobody else. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and eschewed evil. Perfect there does not mean flawless. It means whole, sound. A man with no cracks running through the middle of him. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. He had 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 she-asses, and a household so large, the text calls him the greatest of all the men of the East. And here is the detail I keep coming back to, the one that tells you what kind of man he really was. His grown children would hold feasts, each in his own house, and they would send for one another. And when the days of their feasting were finished, Job would rise up early in the morning and offer a burnt offering for every one of them. For Job said, "It may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." He did not even know if they had done wrong. He just covered them in case. That is a praying father. A man up before the sun, lifting his children to God one by one, year after year, when nothing was wrong yet. I think a lot of you know exactly what that kind of love looks like, because you have done it over a kitchen table at 5 in the morning yourselves. So set the scene the way the camera would. The land of Uz, somewhere east, the tents spread out, the flocks moving over the hills like a slow gray tide. the smell of the morning fire, the children laughing in the next house over, a household at peace, a man at the height of his life, a father on his knees before dawn. This is what was. Hold it gently for one more moment, because the camera is about to turn. And when it turns, it does not turn slow. It came in 4 blows, and not one of them gave him room to breathe. While Job was still at home, a messenger ran in. The oxen were plowing, and the asses feeding beside them. And the Sabaeans fell upon them, and took them away. Yea, they have slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. And while he was yet speaking, another came. The fire of God is fallen from heaven, and hath burned up the sheep and the servants, and consumed them, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. And while he was yet speaking, another. The Chaldeans had taken the camels and killed the men. And while he was yet speaking, the fourth. While he was yet speaking. Read that phrase 4 times in a row, and you start to feel it in your chest. No gap, no mercy of a pause between the wounds. The herds gone, the servants dead. And then the 4th messenger, the one no parent should ever have to hear. Thy sons and thy daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house, and, behold, there came a great wind from the wilderness, and smote the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young men, and they are dead, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. All 10, in one afternoon. The house came down on them while they were laughing. I have sat with grieving parents in funeral homes, and I will tell you there is no sentence in the language harder to say out loud than the one that 4th messenger said. Job heard it standing up, and then he did something I still do not fully understand, though I have read it 100 times. Then Job arose and rent his mantle and shaved his head and fell down upon the ground and worshipped. He did not curse. He did not deny that it hurt. He tore his robe and shaved his head, which is exactly what a man does when grief has gutted him. But he fell down on the ground, and from the floor, from the dirt he worshipped. Naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. I want to be careful here, because this verse gets misused. People quote, "The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away," like it is a thing you say to make pain behave. It is not. This is not a man who did not feel it. This is a man who felt every ounce of it, and still would not let go of God. Worship from the floor is a different thing than worship from the comfort. Many of you have done it. You have stood at a closed casket, and somehow your mouth still formed the words, "Blessed be his name," and you did not feel blessed. You felt emptied out, and you said it anyway. That is not weakness, and that is not denial. That, I have come to believe, is the strongest thing a human being can do. Job did it on day 1, before he had any idea the book would end the way it ends. Let me stop the story and tell you who is talking to you, because you should know I am not reading this off a page I have never lived. I buried my boy Andre in 1994. He was 19. And then I buried my Ruth in 2019, 38 years of marriage gone to cancer, and I held her hand until the last breath went out of her. So when Job's wife stands in that doorway and says, "Curse God and die," I do not flinch, and I do not judge her. I have stood in my own kitchen, late with the house too quiet, and I have thought that same thing in my own words. I am not proud of it. I am just not going to lie to you about it. Here is where I have landed, after 32 years of being a deacon, sitting in the back, sliding chairs, visiting the sick, helping carry the dead out the side door. I know that ash heap. I did not read about it. Some of us recognized it the moment we got to the second chapter, because we have already been there ourselves. Now 3 men hear what happened to their friend, and they come. Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. They had heard of all the evil that had come upon him, and they made an appointment together to come and mourn with him and to comfort him. And I want to give them their due before I say anything hard about them, because the first thing they did right. And when they lifted up their eyes afar off and knew him not, they lifted up their voices and wept. And they rent every one his mantle and sprinkled dust upon their heads toward heaven. They did not even recognize him. The boils had changed his face that much. And they wept, and they tore their own robes, and they threw dust on their own heads. And then they did the wisest thing they would do in the entire book. So they sat down with him upon the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and none spake a word unto him, for they saw that his grief was very great. 7 days, a whole week, sitting in the dirt next to a ruined man, and nobody said a thing. No advice, no verses fired off like arrows. No, have you considered, or, well, at least, just presence. Just 3 men willing to get down in the ashes and be quiet next to a 4th. I have come to believe that those 7 silent days were the closest these 3 ever came to actually comforting Job. They were never more helpful than when they had nothing to say. If you have lived long enough to bury people, you already know this in your bones. The folks who helped you most in your worst week were almost never the ones with the explanation. They were the ones who showed up, sat down, and stayed. They brought the food and washed your dishes and did not make you talk. My Ruth used to say the most loving thing you can do for a grieving person is to come and be a warm body in the room and keep your mouth closed. The friends got that part right for 7 days. The trouble started the moment one of them opened his mouth, because on the 8th day the silence broke and the comfort died with it. Job finally spoke first. He cursed the day he was born, which is a thing a man in that much pain has the right to do. And Eliphaz, hearing it, decided it was time to set his friend straight. And what came out of him sounded gentle, almost pastoral. But listen to the machine running underneath it. Remember, I pray thee, whoever perished, being innocent, or where were the righteous cut off? Do you hear what he just did? He just asked, very politely, when have you ever seen a good man destroyed like this? And the unspoken answer hanging in the air was, never. Which means, Job, you must not be what we thought you were. That is the engine under all the comfort that is about to come. And I have seen it wreck people in my own pew, so let me name it plainly. The machine says this: suffering is punishment. If you are suffering, you must have sinned. So the way out is to figure out what you did, confess it, and the suffering will stop. It is clean. It is tidy. It lets the people who are not suffering feel safe, because as long as the rule holds, they can tell themselves their own good life is proof of their own goodness. There is only one problem with it. It is a lie, and the whole book of Job exists to take it apart and see what it does to the man on the ash heap. He has already lost his 10 children, his health, his wealth, and his wife's patience. Now the 3 friends who came to hold him are slowly, reasonably, with scripture-sounding logic, telling him that all of it is his own fault. That somewhere in his heart is a hidden sin big enough to have killed his children. Think about what that is to a grieving father. It is the second wound, and in some ways it cuts deeper than the first, because it comes from the people who were supposed to be safe. the God he could maybe wrestle with. But to be lectured at the bottom of the pit by your own friends, told your grief is the receipt for your sin, when you know in your gut you did nothing to earn this. That is a particular kind of alone. Many of you know that one too. And it did not stop with Eliphaz. Bildad took his turn, and Bildad was harder. Doth God pervert judgment, or doth the Almighty pervert justice? Hear the trap in that question. He is saying God is fair. God does not punish the innocent. Therefore, if your children died, well, draw your own conclusion. He even said it about the children directly, that if they had sinned, God had cast them away for their transgression. To say that to a father, a week into burying all 10 of them, then Zophar came, and Zophar was the coldest of the 3. He looked at this broken man and told him that God was actually going easy on him. Know therefore that God exacteth of thee less than thine iniquity deserveth, less than you deserve. As if the right response to 10 fresh graves and a body full of sores was for Job to feel grateful, it was not worse. And here is where I love this man, because here is where Job does the thing most of us would have caved on. He will not lie about himself to make his friends comfortable. He searches his own heart honestly, the way an upright man does, and he comes up with nothing that would explain this. So he holds his ground. He says, in essence, I do not have the answer to why this happened, but I am not going to invent a sign of I did not commit, just so your tidy little rule can stay standing. He holds onto his integrity with no explanation in his hand. Think about how much harder that is than it sounds. It would have been easier to break down and say, you are right, I must have done something. Just stop talking. Job would not buy peace with a lie about who he was. I think there is a word here for somebody watching who has been accused by people who never sat where you sit. Somebody decided they understood your whole life from the outside. They looked at your hard season and built a story about what you must have done to deserve it. And they told it to you with a Bible verse attached. And the temptation is to just agree, to take the blame you do not owe. Because carrying false guilt feels less lonely than standing your ground by yourself. Job teaches you that you can grieve, you cannot understand, you can have no answer at all, and still refuse to confess to something you did not do. Your integrity is not arrogance. Sometimes holding it is the last honest thing you have left. By the time we get into the middle of the book, Job has had enough of all 3 of them. And he says the thing that names exactly what they have become. I have heard many such things. Miserable comforters are ye all. Miserable comforters. Sit with that phrase, because it is one of the saddest in the Bible. These were his friends. They started so well, 7 days of silence in the dirt. And now he has to tell them to their faces that their comfort has become misery, that their visit has become one more thing he has to survive. He even tells them what would have been better. Oh, that ye would altogether hold your peace, and it should be your wisdom. In other words, the wisest thing you could do right now is shut your mouths. Go back to the first 7 days. You were closer to helping me when you said nothing at all. There is a sermon in that for all of us who think the loving thing to do for a hurting person is to explain their pain to them. Job is telling you straight, usually it is not. Usually the wisdom is the silence. So now look at where this leaves him, because it is worse than where the chapter started. He has lost his children, he has lost his wealth and his health, and now, on top of all of it, he has effectively lost his friends too, the 3 men who came all that way and ended up wounding him with theology. He is more alone at the end of the arguments than he was in the silent week. And it is from inside the deepest loneliness, with no comfort left on any side, that Job is about to do the boldest thing in the whole book. He is going to stop talking to the friends entirely and turn and start talking to God himself. When the friends finally exhaust themselves, Job turns away from them and aims himself straight at heaven. And what he says is not what you would hear in most prayer meetings. Oh, that I knew where I might find him, that I might come even to his seat. I would order my cause before him and fill my mouth with arguments. Read that again slowly. He is not asking for comfort. He is asking for a court date. He wants to find the throne of God, walk up to it, and argue his case. Fill my mouth with arguments. This is a grieving man who wants to take God to trial and demand to know what he thinks he is doing. I know that makes some church folks nervous. We have been trained to think the holy response to suffering is a quiet, smiling, well, God knows best. And there is a time for that. But I want you to notice that the Bible itself, the inspired text, hands us a righteous man, the most upright man in the East by God's own description, and lets him pray angry, lets him demand a hearing, lets him say to God's face, I would argue with you if I could find you. The book does not rebuke him for it. So if you have ever prayed with your fists clenched, if you have ever wanted to take God to court and ask him why, I want you to hear me. You are in older and better company than you think. Job got there first, and God did not strike him down for it. But here is the part that makes this the hardest book in the Bible to live inside. He goes looking for that court date, and he cannot find the courtroom. Behold, I go forward, but he is not there, and backward, but I cannot perceive him. On the left hand, where he doth work, but I cannot behold him. He hideth himself on the right hand, that I cannot see him. Forward, backward, left, right, every direction a man can turn, and God is not there to be found. Job is not just suffering. Job is suffering in what feels like total silence. He is shouting into a sky that will not answer back. And I want to lay one truth down right here, early, because it is the spine of this whole story and the whole reason I am telling it to you. For most of this book, God says nothing. Chapter after chapter, Job cries out, the friends argue, the pain grinds on, and heaven stays quiet. But I have come to believe, and I would stake a lot on it, that the silence of God is not the absence of God. Those are two completely different things, and learning to tell them apart is most of what faith even is. A God who is silent is still in the room. A God who is gone left. Job felt like God was gone. The end of the book proves God was in the room the entire time, listening to every word. I have watched that truth save people, and I have watched the loss of it sink them, so I do not say it lightly. The cruelest thing the long silence does is start whispering its own interpretation to you. You stop hearing from God for a season, and after a while, the quiet does not stay neutral. It starts telling you a story. It tells you he has lost interest. It tells you that other people get answers and you do not, so the problem must be you. It tells you that maybe you were never heard at all. And Job sat under exactly that whispering for chapter after chapter, the silence growing its own lies in the empty space. What I want you to take from his story is permission to refuse the interpretation. The silence is real. The pain of it is real. But the silence does not get to tell you what it means. Only God gets to do that. And at the end of the book, God tells Job he had been there the whole time. The quiet was never the verdict the quiet pretended to be. So, how do you survive the stretch where you cannot tell the difference? where forward and backward and left and right all come back empty, and the only thing you have is the unanswered prayer still hanging in the air. Look at what Job actually does, because it is the quiet miracle of the middle chapters. He keeps talking to him. That is it. That is the whole thing. He cannot find God. He cannot see God. He gets no reply, and he keeps addressing his words to God anyway. For a long stretch of this book, the only visible evidence that God exists at all is that a broken man on a dung heap refuses to stop speaking to him. Sometimes, friend, that is the only evidence you will have for a season too. And I am here to tell you it is enough to hold the line. Let me tell you how a working man reads, "He is not there," because I did not learn it in a seminary. I spent 30 years on the floor at US Steel in Gary, Indiana. Hot work, loud work, night shifts that went on so long you forgot the sun existed. And I learned something on that floor that the books do not teach you. I learned what it costs to stay somewhere hard, when nobody is saying, thank you, when the work is brutal and the recognition never comes and you just keep showing up, because that is who you decided to be. That is the lens I read this chapter through. When Job says God is not there, I do not hear a man whose faith failed. I hear a man on a long shift in the dark doing the work of staying, with no thank you coming back. I have come to believe there is a difference between a God who has gone silent and a God who has gone, and I learned to tell them apart the hard way, over years, the way you learn anything that actually costs you something. If you have waited on God longer than felt fair, and you are somehow still here, still asking, still talking to Him, then you already know more about faith than the men who never had to wait at all. And then, out of the lowest place in the whole book, with no answer in his hand and no God in sight, Job says the most stubborn sentence of faith in all of Scripture, "For I know that my Redeemer liveth, and that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth. And though after my skin worms destroy this body, yet in my flesh shall I see God." Stop and look at where that comes from. Not from a man whose prayers got answered, not from a comfortable man in a good year. It comes from a man sitting in ashes, scraping his sores, convinced his own body is rotting toward the grave, who has just told us God is nowhere to be found. And from there, he says, "I know my Redeemer lives. I will see God with these eyes." I do not have a tidy explanation for how a person holds on to God by a thread that thin. I just know it happens, because I have watched it, and a few times I have done it. Faith at its strongest is almost never the faith that feels strong. It is the faith that has nothing left in its hand, no proof, no evidence, no answered prayer, no sign in the sky, and chooses to say, "I know my Redeemer liveth," into the dark anyway. If you are holding on by exactly that kind of thread right now, I want you to know the Bible does not look down on you for it. The Bible put Job's thread-thin "I know" in red letters for all of history to read. He had less reason to believe than almost anyone, and he believed harder than almost anyone. He never does get his answer in these chapters. That is important, so I will not pretend otherwise. The why does not come. The explanation he was demanding never arrives on schedule. But hear what he refuses to do. He says, "Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him, even if this kills me. Even if the silence is the last thing I ever hear from God, I will not curse him and quit." Job will argue. He will complain. He will demand his court date and shake his fist at a sky that will not answer. But he will not walk away from the God he cannot find. And what the end of the book reveals is this: The presence that finally shows up in the whirlwind was being held onto in the dark long before it was ever felt. He held on to God before he could feel God holding on to him. That, I believe, is the bravest thing a human heart can do. And then it happens. After all the silence, after all the arguing, after 30-some chapters of a man shouting into an empty sky, and 3 friends grinding him down, the heavens finally open. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, "Then." That one word carries the weight of the whole book. Then, after the waiting. Then, after the silence that felt like abandonment, the God who seemed gone the entire story does not send a messenger, does not send a dream, does not send another friend with another theory. He comes himself. He steps into the storm and he speaks the man's name. The silence breaks, and it breaks like thunder. I want you to feel the timing of it, because the timing is the sermon. God did not answer in chapter 3 when Job first cried out. He did not answer in chapter 10 or 20 or 30. The answer came when it came, on heaven's clock and not on Job's. And this is one of the hardest, truest things I know about walking with God. So let me say it slow. The appointed moment, when it finally arrives all at once. You can wait for years and feel like nothing is moving, like the sky is bronze and your prayers are bouncing off it. And then God moves, and it is not gradual. It is a whirlwind. It is sudden. It is the whole weather of heaven turning at once. The waiting felt endless. The answer, when it came in a single breath. But here is what catches everyone off guard the first time they really read it. And it caught me too. God shows up, and he does not explain anything. Job wanted a why. Job had been demanding a reason, a court case, an accounting. And God opens his mouth out of the whirlwind and asks Job a question instead. "Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare, if thou hast understanding." That is not an answer. That is the beginning of the most overwhelming series of questions in the Bible, and not one of them tells Job why his children died. God just keeps going. Were you there when the morning stars sang together? Have you walked in the depths of the sea? Have you commanded the morning since your days began? Canst thou bind the sweet influences of Pleiades, or loose the bands of Orion? He takes Job on a tour of the whole creation, the storehouses of the snow, the wild goats giving birth in the high rocks, the wild donkey who laughs at the city and answers to no driver, the hawk that stretches her wings toward the south, the great beasts no man can tame. Question after question after question. And every single one of them is underneath the same question. Job, do you have any idea who you are talking to? And he does not hurry it either. For chapter after chapter, the voice out of the whirlwind keeps unrolling the world in front of Job. He asks the man if he can send the lightnings out so they go and come back and say to him, "Here we are." He asks who put wisdom in the inward parts, who gives the horse his strength and clothes his neck with thunder, so that the animal laughs at fear and charges straight into the battle. Then God turns to the 2 great creatures, Behemoth and Leviathan, beasts so vast and so wild that no man alive could put a hook in their nose or a rope on their tongue. "Canst thou draw out Leviathan with an hook?" he asks. And the point under every one of these pictures is the very same point. There is an entire creation out there, roaring and breeding and thundering on, that has nothing to do with whether any one man was good enough to deserve it. The rain falls on the empty wilderness where no person lives. The wild things are fed by a hand that owes them nothing at all. The world is not a courtroom where the universe pays each person out exactly what he earned. Now sit with the strangeness of that for a moment, because it took me years to feel the comfort hiding inside it. On the surface, it can sound like God simply dodged the question. Job asked why, and God came back with snow and stars and sea monsters. But look closer at what he is actually taking apart. The friends had built a small, cruel little world where every drop of suffering was a payment for some hidden sin, where God was nothing more than a clerk tallying up credits and debts. And out of the storm, God shows Job a creation so wide and so wild, so far past human accounting, that the clerk god simply cannot survive the sight of it. The god of Pleiades and Orion and Leviathan does not run a vending machine where you feed in good behavior and pull out an easy life. He is bigger than the rule that was crushing Job. And, strange as it is to say, being shown that bigness was the beginning of the man's healing. Now I have heard people read those chapters and think God is being a bully, putting the little man in his place. I do not read it that way at all, and I have sat with it a long time. I think God is doing something far kinder and far stranger than a put-down. He is not humiliating Job. He is freeing him. For weeks, Job had been trapped inside the friend's tiny rule, told over and over that his suffering had to be a verdict against him. And there was no air in that room. And God walks in out of the storm and throws every window open at once. He does not hand Job a smaller answer. He hands him a bigger God. And a bigger God is exactly the thing a crushed man needs more than an explanation. You cannot argue your way out of grief like the friends wanted Job to, but you can be carried up out of it by something vast enough to hold you. And that is what the whirlwind was. Not a rebuke, a rescue dressed up as a question. I have to stop here and tell you the truth about myself, because this is the part of the book I needed the most, and I needed it for 30 years. In 1994, I buried my son, Andre. He was 19 years old, and he died to street violence in Gary. And there is no sentence I can write that will carry what that did to me. I want you to understand, I had been a faithful man. 32 years a deacon, up before dawn praying for my children the way Job did. And when they put my boy in the ground, I told God to his face that I was done. Not quietly. I meant it. I wanted an explanation, and I felt I had earned one. And I stood in front of God and demanded to know why my son and not somebody else's. And do you know what God gave me? He gave me what he gave Job. He did not give me the explanation. To this day, more than 30 years later, I do not have the why. What I got instead was harder to name and slower to recognize. I told God I was done, and he did not argue with me. He did not defend himself. He just would not leave. I would push, and he stayed. I would go cold for months, and he stayed. And I will be honest with you, because this whole channel is built on me not lying to you. It took me years to call that faithfulness instead of just stubbornness on his part. I resented that he would not go even when I told him to. It was a long time before I understood that the not leaving was the answer, that the presence in the room was the thing the explanation never could have been. That is exactly what happens to Job in the whirlwind. God answers, and he never once tells him why. He does not explain the children. He does not justify the boils. He gives Job something instead of an answer, and the something turns out to be himself. And here is the line I want you to carry out of this video, the hinge the whole story swings on. Job did not get his questions answered. He got God. And God turned out to be enough. I know how that sounds to somebody still standing at a fresh grave, still demanding the why. I am not asking you to feel it yet. I am just telling you, as a man who walked the long road, that the day finally came when the presence was more to me than the explanation would have been. And that is not a promise I am making you out of my own good wishes. That is the one he already made, written into the oldest book in the Bible, kept for 30 centuries so a tired man in Atlanta could read it to you tonight. So watch the turn in Job himself, because the man changes. He had said, "Back in the dark, I know that my Redeemer liveth." But that was faith reaching for a God he could not see. Now, out of the whirlwind, having met him, Job says something different. "I have heard of thee by the hearing of the ear, but now mine eye seeth thee." Do you feel the difference? Before, it was second-hand. He had heard about God his whole life, the way you hear about a man you have never met. Now, he says, "I see you with my own eye," not the hearing of the ear anymore, the seeing of the eye. And then the last thing, and it is so important not to mishear it. "Wherefore I abhor myself and repent in dust and ashes." That is not a crushed man. That is not God finally breaking his spirit. That is a man who came face to face with the living God and was undone the way anybody would be undone, and found himself small in the best possible way, the way you feel small and safe, at the same time standing under a sky full of stars. The ash heap did not change. He is still sitting in the same dust, but the dust is not a garbage pile anymore. It became the meeting place. The very ashes the town threw him out to became the ground where he finally saw God with his own eyes. The man who could not find God anywhere in chapter 23 has now seen him face to face in chapter 42. And he did not have to leave the ash heap to do it. Now watch what God does before he restores a single thing to Job, because the order of it matters. The first thing the Lord deals with is not the livestock. It is the friends. And it was so that after the Lord had spoken these words unto Job, the Lord said to Eliphaz the Temanite, "My wrath is kindled against thee and against thy two friends, for ye have not spoken of me the thing that is right, as my servant Job hath. Stop, and let that land." The three men who spent the whole book defending God, lecturing Job about God's justice, quoting their tidy theology, are the ones God says got him wrong. And the broken man on the ash heap who argued and complained and demanded a court date, the one they kept correcting, is the one God calls my servant Job and says spoke rightly. That is a stunning reversal, and I have leaned on it more than once. The men who were so sure they were defending God were misrepresenting him the whole time, because they reduced him to a vending machine of reward and punishment. And the man wrestling honestly in the dark, refusing to fake an answer he did not have, was closer to the truth of God than all their certainty. There is a word in that for anybody who has ever been made to feel like your honest struggle was less faithful than somebody else's easy answers. God may see it the other way around. And then God does something so generous it almost gets missed. He tells the three friends to bring 7 bulls and 7 rams to Job and offer them up. "And my servant Job shall pray for you. For him will I accept." Did you catch the door he just opened and who he handed the key to? The only way out for the men who wounded Job is Job's own prayer for them. God could have judged them on the spot. Instead, he makes their forgiveness run straight through the man they hurt. He puts the healing of the accusers into the hands of the accused. I want to slow down right here, because I think God just settled an account that Job could never have settled on his own. And there is comfort in that for a lot of you. You are carrying old wounds from people who never apologized. A parent, a brother, a friend from church, somebody who looked at your hardest season and told you it was your own fault, and then went on with their life and never once said sorry. And you have been quietly waiting for an apology that is never coming, and it eats at you. Here is what God does in this story. He does not make Job chase the apology. He takes the matter into his own hands, and he even gives Job the dignity of being the channel of grace to the very men who hurt him. The account you cannot close, God can. I have had to leave a few of mine with him, because I could not close them myself. So now comes the hardest and most beautiful verse of the restoration. And almost everybody reads right past the order of it. And the Lord turned the captivity of Job when he prayed for his friends. When? Not after the livestock came back, not after he felt vindicated. The turn came at the exact moment Job prayed for the men who had spent weeks accusing him of killing his own children. The blessing did not come when Job got even. It came when Job let go. Think about how unfair that is, and how like God it is. Job had every right on earth to walk away from those three. He had every right to let them stew. Nobody watching would have blamed him. And instead he gets down and prays for them, asks God to be merciful to the very men who made his worst week worse. And it is in that act, the act of forgiving people who never earned it, that his own chains fall off. I will be honest, that is one of the hardest truths in Scripture for me to live, and I do not always live it well. But I have seen it hold. The aging viewer who is still being asked to forgive somebody who never said sorry, I am not telling you it is easy. I am telling you what the verse tells me. Sometimes the prison door for you is unlocked from the inside by your prayer for the very person you would rather see God deal with. And then the blessing comes, and we have to be careful and honest with how we read it, because a careless reading turns this whole book into the very lie it spent 40 chapters destroying. So the Lord blessed the latter end of Job more than his beginning, for he had 14,000 sheep and 6,000 camels and 1,000 yoke of oxen and 1,000 she-asses. Look at the numbers. The sheep doubled, the camels doubled, the oxen doubled. Everything material in his life came back twice over. The man who lost it all is now richer than he ever was. And then comes the line that I have to read carefully every single time. The line that keeps this from being a fairy tale. He had also 7 sons and 3 daughters. Now stop. Did you catch it? He doubled the sheep. He doubled the camels. He doubled the oxen. But he did not double the children. 7 sons and 3 daughters, the exact same number he lost. And I have sat with that for a long time. And here is where I have landed, and I believe it with everything in me. God did not double the children because the first 10 were not gone. They were not erased. They were not replaced like dead livestock. They were ahead of him. In the math of heaven, Job still had 20 children. 10 were waiting on the other side, and 10 were in his arms. You do not replace a buried child. That is not how it works, and the text knows it is not how it works. You are reunited with one. The doubling stops at the children because children are not property to be counted twice. They are people, and Job's first 10 were still his. That, friend, is the whole payload of this movie, so let me say it as plain as I can. The restoration was real, but the restoration was never the point. The point was the one who climbed into the ash heap and never climbed out without him. The sheep and the camels were the receipt. They were not the reason. The reason was a presence that stayed through the silence, that answered out of the whirlwind. That turned out to be enough before a single sheep ever came back. The world left Job at the station. It told him to curse God and die. But watch who stayed on the train. The blessing at the end is just God showing, in livestock and in laughter, what was true on day one in the ashes when nobody could see it. He never left. And the book closes the way a long life closes, with both things in the same house. After this lived Job 140 years, and saw his sons and his sons' sons, even 4 generations. So Job died, being old and full of days. An old man full of days, new daughters so beautiful the text stops to name them, Jemima and Keziah and Keren Happuch, and gives them an inheritance among their brothers, which almost never happened in those days. Grandchildren on his knee, 4 generations. A good, long, full ending. But do not let the warmth of it fool you into thinking the grief got erased, because it did not, and the Bible is too honest to pretend it did. Every one of those new daughters was a gift, and not one of them filled the specific chair of the daughter who died under that roof. Job lived 140 more years, carrying 10 graves in his chest the whole time. The new joy and the old sorrow lived in the same house, at the same table, for the rest of his life. And I think that is the most truthful picture of restoration in all of Scripture. It is not the loss undone. It is joy returning to a heart that still has scars. A lot of you are living in exactly that house right now. You have new grandchildren and an empty chair at the same table. You have a fullness in this season of your life that you are genuinely grateful for, and you have a grief sitting right next to it that never fully lifts, and some days you feel guilty for having both at once. Hear me. Job had both for 140 years, and God called his end blessed anyway. The empty chair does not cancel the blessing, and the blessing does not erase the empty chair. They sit at the table together, and the God who stayed sits down with both of them. So let us stand back and look at the whole road one more time, from the ashes to the whirlwind to the old man full of days. The children left, the health left, the wealth left, the wife's patience left. The friends came, and then they too, in their own way, left him more alone than they found him. Station after station, everyone he leaned on stepped off the train. And through every one of those departures, there was one who never explained himself and also never left. I have been sitting with that pairing for a long time, and I think it is the deepest comfort the book has to give. God did not owe Job an explanation and never gave him one, but he also never once got off the train. That is where "now mine eye seeth thee" lands, when you sit with it long enough. It is not the cry of a man who finally got his questions answered. It is the cry of a man who found out the presence was the answer all along. Job did not outlast his grief by being strong enough. He was held through it by someone stronger. He sat in the dust and discovered the dust was occupied. He went looking for an explanation and found a companion instead, and somewhere in the long years that followed, he stopped needing the explanation, because the companion turned out to be the thing his heart had actually been starving for the whole time. And I want to be clear about what I am and am not saying to you, because this channel does not deal in date setting, and it does not deal in telling you that you are special enough to be exempt from sorrow. I am not saying God will hand back what you lost on a timeline that suits you. I have buried too many people to ever stand here and sell you that. I am saying something quieter and, I believe, far sturdier. The same covenant faithfulness that held one ruined man on a dung heap 3,000 years ago is the same faithfulness reaching for you in yours. The God of Job is not a character in an old story. He is the one who has been sitting in your ashes the whole time you thought you were alone in them. It held him. It can hold you. Let me speak to you now plain, the way I would on my own porch. I told you, I am a man who has watched people get off the train. My father got off first. I was 7 years old in 1965, standing on the platform of the Illinois Central with my mama's hand in mine, watching the door for a man who never came through it. Then my boy Andre in 1994. Then my Ruth in 2019, after 38 years. I know what it is to keep boarding a train that keeps emptying out, and I know the one companion who has never once stepped off. So here is what I want to say directly to you. If God ever sat with you in a hospital room at 2 in the morning, if he kept you company in a kitchen too quiet to bear, and you are somehow still here, still breathing, still listening to an old man tell you a story, then you already know this God. You do not need me to introduce you. Right next to my chair is my Ruth's King James Bible, and she underlined a verse in it. The one Job said, "Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him." I did not understand why she marked it until the year after she was gone. Now I do. So here is where I leave you tonight. Here is the man the world told to curse God and die, sitting in the garbage at the edge of town with a piece of broken pot in his hand. And here is the God who did not send a theory or a messenger, but came himself out of the whirlwind and stayed until the man was old and full of days. The one who stayed in Job's ashes has not left yours. That is not a promise I am making you out of my own kindness. It is the one he already made, and he has never broken it yet. If God stayed with you when somebody left, I want you to do one thing for me. Type "stayed" in the comments. Just that one word. Let somebody else scrolling through their own hard night see that they are not the only one he sat down with. You were seen on the ash heap. You were never forgotten. And the one who never got off the train is sitting with you still. Stayed. He stayed. One last thing before you go. This is how I read scripture, not a prophetic word. I quote the King James Version unless I say otherwise. If the Lord stayed with the people in these stories, he can stay with you. That's not a promise I'm making. It's the one he made. Leave your testimony in the comments. I read them.